Last week, we finished our examination of Joseph Smith's so-called revelation on plural marriage, known as Doctrine and Covenants 132. In that revelation, Joseph had God state that Sarah of the Old Testament was justified in having her husband Abraham take Hagar, her handmaiden, to be one of his wives so that he could produce children through her and fulfill God's promise. God's promise that Abraham's seed would be proliferated throughout the world. The biblical reason, my friends, is that Abraham and Sarah should have waited on God to make good on his promise, but instead they took matters into their own hands. This is a great picture for all of the decisions we make as Christians. Do we wait on the Lord, or do we take matters into our own hands? Mormonism, because of their theological model relative to the fall, pre-existence, and salvation by grace and works, tacitly says opposite of what the lesson would be, with Joseph actually saying that God justified Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar in their decision. Using this very event of Abraham and Hagar in an allegory, Paul in the book of Galatians compares Abraham's union with Hagar as an act of the flesh, representing the law, but the production of Isaac, which was what God had promised, as a work of the Spirit, which is founded in liberty. Furthermore, Paul goes on in Galatians 4 and compares the literal birth and existence of Ishmael as representing the flesh, which wars against the literal birth and existence of Isaac, who represents spirit. Paul wrote in verse 29, "But as he who was born according to the flesh then persecuted him who was born according to the Spirit, so even is it now." By using this specific story out of the scripture, Paul is saying several important things that we can learn, all of which fly in the face of LDS teachings, beliefs, and doctrines relative to Abraham. First, he makes the point that Abraham's polygamous choice did not originate from God, but from the flesh side of man. Okay? Second, he points out that such decisions ended up afflicting the children of Israel, not helping them, just as Ishmael and his progeny have ended up afflicting Isaac and his progeny even to this very day. It wasn't a beneficial thing that resulted from Abraham and Sarah making this fleshly decision. It was a negative thing to the children of Israel even to this day. Third, Paul tells us through Scripture and citing the allegory what to do when we have created problems for ourselves by choosing to act through the flesh. Again, he infers that our actions ought to replicate Abraham and Sarah's actions toward Hagar. Listen to what he says. "Cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be heir with the son of the free woman. So then, brethren, we are not children of the bondwoman, but of the free." Think on this concept a while. It's deep, but it's yet another indicator of how Mormonism contrasts with biblical truth.